Most men today are obsessed with escaping pain. We build entire lives around comfort. We avoid struggle, chase pleasure, numb ourselves with distraction, and call this progress. But Nietzsche saw it differently. He believed that comfort makes men weak, and that weakness breeds decay. To him, suffering was not an obstacle to avoid, but the very fire that forges greatness. And this is why most people secretly hate Nietzsche. He does not let you hide. He claimed that those who run from suffering are condemned to live as slaves. Not slaves in chains, but slaves to their own fear, their own addictions, their own inability to endure the harsh weight of existence. Every man who flees hardship is, in Nietzsche's words, a last man, a hollow being who seeks nothing higher than survival and pleasure. And yet, here is the forbidden truth. The men who embrace suffering, who stare directly into the abyss, are the only ones who rise above it. They are the ones who carve meaning from chaos, who gain power not because life was kind, but because they refused to be broken. This is Nietzsche's brutal advice. If you want power, if you want freedom, if you want to stop living like a victim, you must stop wishing for an easy life. You must embrace suffering, willingly, deliberately, completely. Because it is only through suffering that you will be reborn into someone unrecognizable to your former self. When Nietzsche looked at the world of his time, he saw something that most men still refuse to confront today. He saw a civilization softening, retreating into safety, building systems of morality that denied life's most brutal realities. And he warned that the same forces destroying men in the 19th century would one day rot the soul of the modern man. That day is now. At the core of Nietzsche's philosophy is a single, merciless truth: life is suffering. Not occasionally, not by accident, but as its very essence. To exist is to struggle, to hurt, to be torn between what you desire and what reality allows. But instead of facing this truth, most men build illusions to protect themselves from it. Religion, comfort, even shallow happiness. Nietzsche saw them not as solutions, but as opiates, ways of numbing the raw wound of existence. He was not writing these words as some distant academic, untouched by life. Nietzsche himself lived a life riddled with agony. His health was frail, his body racked with illness, his mind often spiraling into darkness. He spent much of his later life in isolation, estranged from friends, misunderstood by society, and rejected in love. And yet, he never saw his suffering as meaningless. He treated it as the crucible that revealed truth. He believed that his pain was the very source of his clarity, the furnace in which his philosophy was born. This is why Nietzsche's writings carry the weight they do. They are not sterile theories. They are blood-soaked confessions written by a man who refused to look away from his own torment. And through that torment, he saw what most men cannot bear to admit. Suffering is not the enemy. It is the teacher. Nietzsche introduces us to the idea of the Übermensch, the Overman. But he does not mean a superhero in the modern sense. The Übermensch is not born through talent or luck. He is created through the conscious embrace of suffering. Only by enduring hardship without flinching can a man transcend mediocrity. The Overman is the one who says yes to life, even when life is brutal, even when it breaks him, even when every instinct screams for escape. And yet, the average man does the opposite. He avoids suffering. He hides behind excuses, distractions, cheap pleasures. He dreams of success without sacrifice, love without rejection, strength without pain. Nietzsche would call such a man weak. Not because weakness is a crime, but because weakness is a refusal to live fully, a refusal to carry the weight that makes you worthy of respect. To Nietzsche, the distinction between the strong and the weak is not about muscles or status. It is about spirit. The strong man is the one who can take the chaos of existence, the suffering, the loss, the failure, and still say, "I will turn this into power." The weak man is the one who collapses under that weight and pretends he never wanted more. This is the essence of Nietzsche's philosophy of suffering. It is not something that happens to you. It is the very raw material from which you build yourself. Pain is clay. Struggle is fire. Loss is hammer and anvil. And if you accept this, if you lean into it, you do not remain who you are. You become something entirely new. Nietzsche described this transformation in one of his most haunting metaphors, the three metamorphoses of the spirit. First comes the camel, who carries the weight of suffering, bending under it, taking on burden after burden. Then comes the lion, who learns to rebel, to roar, no against the world's chains, to fight against false morality and imposed weakness. Finally comes the child, not childish, but reborn, capable of creation, free from the illusions of the herd, able to say yes to existence in its fullness. This is the journey of suffering, from endurance to rebellion to rebirth. But here is where Nietzsche cuts deepest. He insists that this transformation is rare because most men refuse to begin. They want to skip straight to the child, to freedom and creation, without first becoming the camel and the lion. They want transcendence without trial, and in this refusal, they condemn themselves to mediocrity. Think about your own life. How many times have you wished that the struggle would end? How many times have you begged for comfort, even though comfort only left you restless, unsatisfied, hollow? Nietzsche would say this is because you are betraying yourself. You are resisting the very force that could transform you. Your suffering is not there to punish you. It is there to break you open, to burn away the weakness, to call forth the strength you did not know you had. Imagine two men. One spends his life running from pain, numbing himself with entertainment, drugs, meaningless distractions, fragile relationships. He thinks he is protecting himself, but over time he becomes smaller, duller, more fragile. The other man walks straight into hardship. He takes on challenges deliberately, tests himself against difficulty, embraces discomfort. At first he suffers more, but slowly his suffering reshapes him. It sharpens his mind, deepens his soul, strengthens his will. Which man will stand taller when life inevitably crushes them both? This is Nietzsche's brutal truth. There is no avoiding suffering. You can deny it, medicate it, disguise it, but it will find you. And if you have not prepared, if you have not willingly trained yourself to endure, it will destroy you. But if you embrace it, if you choose to suffer deliberately, if you accept its necessity, then suffering becomes your greatest weapon. Nietzsche's entire philosophy can be distilled into this paradox. The path to power is paved with pain. To flee suffering is to flee growth. To embrace suffering is to embrace transformation. And only through transformation can you hope to rise above the herd of weak, comfortable men who waste their lives begging for ease. He leaves us with a haunting challenge. Do you dare to suffer? Do you dare to carry the burden, to wrestle with chaos, to say yes to life even when it crushes you? Because if you do not, you will remain forever what Nietzsche despised most, a last man, blinking in the shallow comfort of a meaningless existence. Nietzsche's warning was not meant only for the men of his century. His words were prophetic, and they cut even deeper in our modern age. Because never before in history has it been easier to live as the last man he despised. Today, comfort is everywhere. Everything is designed to shield us from hardship. You do not need to hunt for food. You do not need to defend your home. You do not even need to wrestle with boredom. At the touch of a screen, you can distract yourself endlessly, avoid silence, avoid thought, avoid pain. But what happens to a society of men who no longer suffer? They rot. This is where Nietzsche's philosophy strikes like a blade. He would argue that most men today are spiritually castrated. They confuse comfort with happiness, convenience with progress. They call weakness compassion and cowardice humility. But beneath this mask lies decay. Because if suffering is the path to growth, then escaping suffering is the path to decline. Let's bring this down to something every man feels. Consider relationships. How many men crumble under rejection? How many chase women desperately, beg for attention, or collapse into bitterness when they are ignored? Nietzsche would say the problem is not women. The problem is weakness. A man who has not suffered, who has not faced rejection, who has not been tempered by failure is fragile. He collapses at the first sign of pain because he has never built the muscle to endure it. Women, whether they realize it or not, are drawn to strength. Not arrogance, not bravado, but the quiet strength of a man who has suffered and survived. A man who is not afraid of rejection, who does not beg, who does not crumble. Why? Because suffering has given him weight. He has gravity, and gravity cannot be faked. A man who has been through hell and walked out standing carries a presence that the weak will never understand. Nietzsche would argue that women fear men like this, not because such men are dangerous in the ordinary sense, but because they cannot be controlled. A man forged by suffering does not bend to approval. He is not desperate for comfort. He is not easily manipulated. That kind of man unsettles people, especially those who rely on weakness to control others. Now think about society at large. What happens to a culture when men stop embracing suffering? You get what Nietzsche predicted, a herd. A mass of fragile individuals clinging to comfort, terrified of standing out, terrified of hardship. They hide behind groupthink, behind morality systems designed to flatten strength, behind ideologies that worship safety above all else. Nietzsche would say this is the death of greatness. When everyone wants equality at the cost of excellence, when everyone demands protection from the natural cruelty of life, you no longer get leaders, creators, or warriors. You get caretakers, mediocrities, last men blinking at screens, chasing comfort as the world around them crumbles. You can see it in the workplace. Men who are too afraid to risk failure never rise above mediocrity. They cling to stable jobs they hate, complaining about the system while refusing to test themselves against something greater. Nietzsche would spit on this. To him, it is better to risk everything, to suffer humiliation, to endure defeat, than to rot in safe irrelevance. A man who does not dare, who does not suffer through the chaos of ambition, has already chosen chains over freedom. You can see it in friendships. Weak men surround themselves with weaker men, forming circles where mediocrity is protected. They comfort each other, tell each other it's fine to give up, fine to waste potential, fine to settle. Nietzsche would say these are not friendships, they are conspiracies against growth. True friendship, to him, is forged through struggle, through the fire of suffering. It is not the friend who comforts your weakness, but the friend who demands your strength, who pushes you into discomfort, who refuses to let you remain small. But perhaps the deepest application is personal. Look at your own life. How many times have you sabotaged yourself because you could not endure discomfort? How many dreams have you abandoned because they hurt too much to pursue? Nietzsche's brutal message is that this is why you remain stuck. You are not failing because life is unfair or because others are luckier. You are failing because you keep running from suffering, the very thing that could transform you. Imagine for a moment that you reversed this, that instead of avoiding discomfort, you sought it, that instead of numbing pain, you leaned into it. What would happen if you treated rejection not as a wound, but as training? What if you treated failure not as proof of weakness, but as raw material to forge strength? Nietzsche would say this is the only way to become something greater. And here is the paradox. Once you begin to embrace suffering, it loses its power to terrify you. Rejection becomes just another lesson. Failure becomes just another step. Loneliness becomes a crucible where you learn to stand alone. Suddenly, you are no longer fragile. You are no longer dependent on comfort. You are free. But freedom comes with a price. When you embrace suffering, you set yourself apart. You are no longer like the herd. And this makes people uneasy. Society will try to shame you back into weakness. Friends may resent you. Lovers may fear you. Because you no longer need their approval, and nothing is more unsettling than a man who is truly independent. Nietzsche would argue this is the proof you are on the right path. If no one fears you, you are still too comfortable. This is why Nietzsche insisted that greatness is always lonely. The path of suffering strips away illusions, strips away shallow friendships, strips away the safety nets of comfort. What is left is raw, unflinching solitude. And in that solitude, you meet yourself, your deepest fears, your darkest thoughts, your truest desires. Most men cannot bear this encounter. They will do anything to avoid silence, anything to avoid themselves. But Nietzsche believed that only in this confrontation can a man be reborn. He once wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." These words have been repeated, so often they sound cliché. But when you return to the context, you see their true weight. He did not mean trivial discomforts. He meant the suffering that nearly annihilates you, the pain that rips your identity apart, the failures that crush your pride, the betrayals that shatter your trust. To survive these and still stand is not survival in the ordinary sense. It is rebirth. Nietzsche would argue that modern men spend their lives avoiding the very crucifixion that would resurrect them. They cling to small comforts, terrified of the suffering that would kill who they are now. But only by letting the weaker self die can the stronger self emerge. To avoid suffering is to avoid transformation. To embrace it is to be remade. So the choice is in front of you. Will you continue to live as one of the herd, comfortable, safe, fragile, endlessly complaining about a world you refuse to face? Or will you do what Nietzsche demanded? Step into the fire, embrace suffering, and let it burn away everything weak until only strength remains. Nietzsche was not writing to entertain. His words were meant to wound, to pierce, to shake men awake from the trance of comfort. If suffering is the crucible, then here are the laws that emerge from its fire. The brutal lessons a man must carry if he is to rise above weakness. The first is simple but merciless: never flee pain. Every time you run from discomfort, you shrink. Every time you numb yourself, you trade strength for weakness. Nietzsche would demand that you do the opposite. When you encounter pain, lean into it. When life humiliates you, endure it without excuses. When you are rejected, mocked, or defeated, do not retreat. Stay in the fire until it hardens you. For what you escape will return, but what you endure becomes yours forever. Second, do not beg for respect. Nietzsche would laugh at the modern man who thinks validation is a gift that others can bestow. Respect is not handed down, it is seized. It comes from living in a way that cannot be ignored. If people do not respect you, it is because you have not carried enough weight, suffered enough trial, or demanded enough of yourself. Respect begins in silence, in the way you walk, the way you endure, the way you refuse to flinch. Third, never chase love. For Nietzsche, love is not something you grasp at desperately. It is something that flows towards strength. A man who has been broken and rebuilt carries an aura that draws others without trying. The weak man who chases affection reeks of need, and need repels. Do not chase love, embody power, and love will chase you. Fourth, embrace solitude. Weak men cannot be alone. They drown in silence, suffocate without distraction, panic when forced to face themselves. But Nietzsche would argue that solitude is where strength is forged. In solitude, you cannot lie to yourself. You cannot escape your own reflection. And if you learn to endure that mirror, to live without constant validation, you become untouchable. A man who is comfortable alone cannot be controlled. Fifth, destroy illusions. Nietzsche hated lies, especially the lies men tell themselves to avoid suffering. Comfort is not happiness. Safety is not peace. Weakness is not kindness. To grow, you must rip these illusions apart. Stop pretending your failures don't matter. Stop telling yourself that mediocrity is enough. Stop dressing cowardice in noble words. Face life raw, without anesthetic. Only then can you see clearly. Sixth, suffer deliberately. Nietzsche would argue that it is not enough to accept the suffering that finds you. You must also seek suffering that shapes you. Train your body until it breaks and rebuilds. Take risks that terrify you. Face rejection on purpose. Step into situations where failure is likely. Every voluntary hardship is a rehearsal for the inevitable pains you cannot control. And the man who chooses suffering is always stronger than the man who hides from it. Seventh, create from chaos. Nietzsche believed the highest form of life is creation, not comfort, not consumption, but creation. But creation is born only from turmoil. To write, to build, to lead, to shape the world, these acts demand that you pull order out of your own chaos. If you want to create, you must first bleed. You must first let life tear you apart, then use the fragments to build something greater. Finally, do not wait. The weakness of modern men lies in delay. They think they have endless time, endless chances, endless safety nets. Nietzsche would call this self-deception. Life is slipping through your fingers. Every moment you hesitate, every struggle you avoid, every comfort you embrace instead of hardship, you are choosing decay. The time to suffer is now. The time to embrace the crucible is now. These lessons are not comfortable. They are not polite. They are not meant to soothe. They are meant to cut, to force a choice. Will you remain a man of comfort, or will you step into suffering? Because Nietzsche believed that only by walking willingly into the storm can a man ever hope to emerge with power. So carve these truths into yourself. Never flee pain, never beg, never chase, never lie, never delay. Embrace solitude, embrace suffering, embrace creation. Live as though life owes you nothing, because it doesn't. And when you live this way, you discover the only thing Nietzsche promised, the raw, unbreakable strength of a man who has suffered and risen above it. Nietzsche's truth is not comfortable, and it was never meant to be. He was a man who looked into the abyss and refused to look away, and he demands that you do the same. His warning echoes across time. The man who avoids suffering will rot. The man who embraces suffering will rise. It is as simple and as terrifying as that. Think of your life. Think of the moments you ran from pain, the moments you clung to comfort, the times you numbed yourself instead of facing what hurt. What did those choices create? Did they make you stronger, or did they hollow you out? Nietzsche would say every time you fled, you betrayed yourself. Every time you avoided the crucible, you killed the man you could have become. But the opposite is also true. Every hardship you survived, every failure you endured, every humiliation you carried, these are the very things that forged you. They are not curses. They are the markings of your rebirth. Nietzsche's message is merciless but liberating. What does not kill you does not simply make you stronger. It remakes you. It burns away weakness and leaves behind a sharper, harder, freer self. And yet, most men will never accept this. They will keep hiding, keep numbing, keep begging life to be gentle. They will die as last men, safe, comfortable, irrelevant. But a few will hear Nietzsche's voice. A few will step willingly into the storm. A few will embrace the very suffering that terrifies others. And in doing so, they will become something rare, something untouchable, something powerful. So ask yourself now, as the echo of Nietzsche's words lingers, are you one of the herd, blinking in the dull light of comfort? Or will you stand alone, in the fire, and let it transform you? Because the fire is coming either way. The only choice you have is whether it consumes you, or whether it forges you.